Ira, a lot of people out there, to say the least, are not enamored with what's going on in Washington today. I think we're descending into single-digit favorability, not somewhere, behind God knows who. I want to quote, and I want to chat with you a little bit and get your views as to what's happened. The Senate was once a quite respected institution. That is certainly not the case right now, nor is the House. Let me quote from your prologue. This is what you say. The election of 1980s, that was the Reagan year, shattered the great Senate, and the Senate has never really regained its stature or reclaimed its special place in the life of our country. In the 3 decades since, the Senate, the proud upper house, has become basically a third wheel in our political system. While Presidents Reagan, Clinton, and Bush did battle with the House of Representatives and its powerful speakers, Tip O'Neill, Newt Gingrich, and Nancy Pelosi. The Senate's descent from greatness did not go unnoticed. In 2005, political historian Louis L. Gould wrote that, quote, a profound sense of crisis now surrounds the Senate and its members, end quote, and it would grow still worse. As Barack Obama took office in January 2009, with America facing its worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, the already diminished Senate became virtually dysfunctional, torn by partisanship, paralyzed by filibusters and holds, obsessed with fundraising. The institution seemed frustrated by its lack of accomplishment, but unable to change the situation. The once proud Senate often seemed to be a parody of itself, or in the words of George Packer in the New Yorker, quote, the empty chamber, end of quote. All right, elaborate on that.
Well, I think that what I tried to explain in the epilogue, which the epilogue, somebody said to me, you can't just end it in 1980, you've got to sort of connect it. And I felt the need to do that.
I think that's right, by the way.
And what the epilogue says is 1980 election shattered the Senate. It was the hugest exodus of progressive, Democratic, experienced senators of all time, replaced by very conservative, mostly very conservative, Republican neophyte senators. So it essentially shattered what I call the Senate ecosystem. But I said that in the epilogue, the Senate made a seemingly solid comeback in the mid to late 80s. There were still quite a few good senators around, and it was not unreasonable to think that the Senate would reclaim its position. And if you look at the mid to late 80s, you'll see a lot of accomplishments on a bipartisan basis. So there was some comeback. Then it started down, and it started down, I would say, in the early 90s and has continued to go down. And the difference was the partisanship and the desire of Republican leaders not to work with Democratic presidents. To some extent, that started with Bill Clinton. The Republicans never really acknowledged Bill Clinton as a legitimate president. And it got much worse with Barack Obama. You know, supporters of Barack Obama sometimes say that he was naive to think that he could transcend partisanship. Well, count me among the naive people. I believed the national narrative that in a time of crisis, we would come together across party lines. And that didn't happen. He hasn't gotten the cooperation that he needed. And, the Republicans like to make fun of his statement that elections have consequences. But they do have consequences. The fact that the Republicans had won 7 out of 10 presidential elections since 1968, before Obama, had consequences. Obama was entitled to think that he would get cooperation, not uniform cooperation, but cooperation from the minority. We don't have a parliamentary system which guarantees the party in power the right to get its program done. We believe in a cooperative minority, and he hasn't had it. He hasn't had it. And therefore, the Senate has looked worse in the last few years, despite, I have to say, and Carl Levin pointed this out to me when I spoke to him, very frustrating here. We can't get a lot of things done, even though we've gotten some big things done. So I don't want to say that nothing's gotten done, but the process has been polarized and the process has been often paralyzed.
And this contrasts to the period that you write about.
Yes, it does. And the reason I wrote about the late 70s, somebody said to me, "You're writing a book about the legislative fights of the Carter years? That'll sell well." I said, well, I'll call it the last great Senate. Maybe it'll sell better. But the late 70s were a difficult time for our country and some of the same kinds of problems. Interestingly, Carter, in his White House diary that came out last year, in the notes to the diary, he said, President Obama is facing a lot of the same problems that I faced, but I had one advantage. I had a bipartisan Congress that would work with me. And what he meant by that is he had a bipartisan Senate that would work with him, because the House, he had a Democratic House, just as President Obama had a Democratic House, but he had a different Senate.
All right, let me ask you this question. It's not only that the Senate has changed, the world has changed.
Yeah.
Politics has changed. Right now, for example, we're looking at what I consider to be a disastrous United States Supreme Court decision on Citizens United, which says that corporations and billionaires can spend as much money as they want on political advertising, evolving our political system into control of a very small number of people. I think that's just not what American democracy is supposed to be about. But the role of money in politics has always been there, maybe more. Talk about money in politics, how that ties into some of the changes that we're seeing between the Senate of today and the Senate back there.
It's an important question. I think there's no doubt in my mind that it is harder to be a good senator, an effective senator now than it was. The demands to raise money require a great deal of time from senators that the senators in that book didn't actually have to put in.
Tell me about that. I'm very interested.
Well,
I'm up for re-election. How did they manage to get by without spending time raising money?
Well, the campaigns weren't that expensive.
Okay.
I mean, I remember Senator Tom Eagleton, who was a good friend of mine, who I worked for, Democrat of Missouri, and he was outraged that he might have to raise $1 million if he ran for re-election. So the price of campaigns has gone up dramatically.
Even taking inflation into account.
Yes, and that has taken a toll.
Let me just, as somebody who is in the Senate, comment on that. I think people just don't know what kind of toll it has taken.
Huge.
You see good people, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, spending huge amounts of time raising money, and it's not just the time. No one person has an intellectual wall that can say, okay, I'm going to spend 4 hours a day raising money, and then that's gone. Then I'm going to worry about the important issues facing the American people. It just doesn't work like that. People are obsessed with campaigns and raising money. Citizens United has made a very bad situation much worse, because you need to raise even more money to combat corporate money. But what you're saying is that inflation accounted for, that kind of money-raising pressure was not as significant back then.
No, it really wasn't as significant back then. And I'm not saying that they didn't concern themselves with raising money, but they didn't have to spend that kind of time by any means.
Well, that is a very, very important factor.
Well, it generally, just on the time alone, it contributes to the fact that, and these senators have said so, they say it regularly, we don't spend time together. We're running back to our states, we're running to fundraisers, we actually don't know each other. The senators then spent a lot more time together, in part because of the way the Senate worked. The Senate wasn't televised. It wasn't televised a closed circuit either.
When did C-SPAN begin televising the Senate?
Senate started being televised in 1986. There was closed circuit into the offices a little while before that. But what that meant was, if you wanted to know what was going on in the Senate, you kind of wandered over to the Senate. And you would see the members, the senators would go, they'd do committees in the morning, then they'd have some lunch, usually together, and then they'd wander over to the Senate chamber or the cloakrooms. They were around the Senate floor.
So there would be a lot of members on the floor.
I don't want to exaggerate. There were a lot, but there were a lot more.